Welcome back to Miss Burkhart's math class. Make sure you have your notes and a pencil in order to be able to take notes as you watch the video. You will probably need to pause it in order to be able to complete all of your notes. And make sure you also go back and rewind any parts that you need to rewatch to make sure you completely understand everything before coming to class. So today, we are going to talk about standard 6.4, which is recognizing and representing patterns with whole number exponents and perfect squares. Specifically, today's lesson, you're going to learn what an exponent is, how to write a number in three forms: exponential form, standard form, and expanded form, and also how to use the Desmos calculator to be able to evaluate a number in exponential form. So let's get started. Let's talk about exponents. The expression we have right here is read 4 to the second power. In math, we tend to find short ways to write things that would otherwise be written out in a long way. So here's the exponential form of 4 to the second power. This big number, the 4, is called the base number. Big base. The bigger number is the base number. The little number that's raised up, the 2, it's raised up a little bit and it's smaller, is called the exponent. What the exponent tells you, make sure you're filling this in on your notes, the exponent tells you how many times you multiply the base number by itself. Here's what I mean. So in this example here, 4 to the second power is a short way to write 4 times 4. So we wrote the base number 4 2 times. 4 times 4, which means it's equal to 16. Notice this does not mean 4 times 2. I don't need another way to show multiplication as for it meaning 4 times 2. That's not what the exponent means. This exponent tells you how many times you multiply the base number, the bigger number, by itself. So how many times will you write it? The exponent says 4 times 4, 2 times. And then you multiply it and equals 16. I'm going to show you two other ways to write 4 times 4 without using the x to mean multiply. Why? Because later on we're going to see that x is going to be used for something else. It's going to be what we call a variable. So we want to find some other ways to represent multiplication other than the x. So notice on your notes, here what you're going to write is 4. Now instead of the x, we're going to do this dot that's in the middle. It's not a decimal point. Notice it's not down here. It's up in the middle. 4 times 4, which of course, as we know, equals 16. So we can use the dot to represent multiplication. And the other way to show multiplication is by using parentheses. So instead of the dot, we're just going to put that second 4 inside parentheses. This is another way to show 4 times 4. So notice there was no plus sign, minus, x, division, whatever. It's just the 4 and then parentheses and the other 4 inside. This means 4 times 4, which again, of course, makes 16. The way you can read this exponent, as I've said before, is 4 to the second power. And any number to the second power has another special way of saying it, which is 4 squared. And we'll get into a little later as to why it's called squared. Let's look at our next example. So here we have the 3 different ways that we can write out a number in exponential form. So we have this, the exponential form. Just think, it sounds like exponent, exponential form. It's the form that we use when we have the exponent. The expanded form is the way we write this out the long way, what it means to write what 2, in this case, 2 to the third power means. And it's written out the long way. That's expanded form. And lastly, we have standard form, which is really just the answer when you multiply it out. So here we have 2 to the third power, which, again, written in expanded form, means I'm taking the base number 2, writing it 3 times, and then multiplying that together. So 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. So the standard form is 8. Now let's write it in the 2 other ways that we learned. So instead of the x, we're going to use the dot, which is 2, and then the dot, and 2, and the dot, and the 2. So this also means 2 times 2 times 2. And the last way, we're going to write it with parentheses. So 2, and then the second 2 in parentheses, and then we're going to write it again. So it's just a bunch of 2's in parentheses. If I didn't have the parentheses there, it wouldn't be right? It would just look like 222. This means 2 times 2 times 2. Notice there is a second way that I can read a number to the third power. So this can be read 2 to the third power, or also 2 cubed. So just like when it was to the second power was called squared, this one is 2 to the third power, or 2 cubed. Because think of a cube. It has 3 dimensions, right? Length, width, height. 3 dimensions. That's why it's called cubed. So now let's try some of these. This is on your notes as well. You're going to need to write in 5 to the second power. Do you remember what it's also called if it's to the second power? 5 squared, right? So now let's write that out. 5 squared in expanded form, which is the long way, would be 5 times, remember that dot can mean multiplication, 5 times 5, because I'm writing the base number 2 times, according to that exponent, tells me I read it 2 times. Now I'm going to multiply. And what is the standard form? What is 5 times 5? And you can use your calculator, but that is equal to 25. Let's look at the next example and write this on your notes. 2 to the 5th power. Now, do you think this might be the same answer? Because I've got 5 to the 2nd and I just switched them around, 2 to the 5th. Let's see. So 2 is our base number. And it says I want to write this how many times? 5 times. So I'm going to say 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. How many times do I have so far? 4. I need to do one more time. So I said 2 to the 5th power. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm going to multiply all of that out. Yes, you can use a calculator. 2 times 2 is 4. Times 2 is 8. Times 2 is 16. 16 times 2 is 32. So are they the same thing? No. Let's look at this example. 6 to the 1st power. So how many times am I writing 6? 1 time. That's the expanded form. Not very long, is it? And what's the standard form? It's the same thing. The answer is 6. There's nothing. I'm not multiplying 6 by itself 2 times. It's just once. Now let's look at this. What if I give you the expanded form? 6 times 6. What's the base number? 6, because that's the number that's being repeated. And then the exponent is, how many times did I write the 6? 2 times. Notice it's multiplied together. And then what is the standard form of 6 times 6? 36. Good. Let's try this one. Remember what those parentheses mean when you have numbers that are set apart by parentheses? Multiplication. What's your base number? 3. That's the number that's being repeated. And how many times am I multiplying the 3 together? 1, 2, 3, 4. So the exponent will be to the 4th power. Just that little number raised up. And what does that equal? When you put it into the calculator, 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, you should get 81. How are we doing? This is also an important concept. We won't get into the explanation as to why, but that is a challenge problem for you. But any number to the 0 power, it's not 0. You'd think it would be. But remember how like 6 to the 1st power wasn't 1? This is any number to the 0 power is equal to 1. Any number. Look at these examples. 5 to the 0 power is 1. 3 to the 0 power is 1. 10 to the 0 power, what do you think it is? 1. Now, if you want a challenge, put this in your notes so you can try to see why that is. It's not just because they made it up and they just said it's going to be. There is an actual reason for it. So follow this pattern, 5 to the 4th, 5 to the 3rd, 5 to the 2nd, 1st, and then 5 to the 0. Try this as a challenge. Write it out, each of those in expanded form, and then their answers in standard form, and see if you can see what's happening from 5 to the 4th to 5 to the 3rd to the 2nd, to see if you can figure out why. And when you do, bring it to me in class, and you'll get a prize if you get it right. But the main thing to remember is any number to the 0 power is equal to what? 1. So now let's take a look at some different ways we can use the Desmos calculator to evaluate exponents. In other words, to figure out what they're equal to, the standard form. So if we look at 5 to the 3rd power, we will see that that is going to be, remember that means 5, the base number multiplied by itself, written 3 times, and we'd solve that. So one way to get to your Desmos scientific calculator is in Canvas, in your Math Canvas course. On this, the menu bar, it says Desmos Scientific Calculator. You would click on that. So you'd open it up in a new tab. You'd say yes. And then you would get this. This is the calculator. So as we said, 5 to the 3rd power, you can do 5 times 5 times 5. And notice in Desmos, you don't have an equals button. It just automatically shows you the answer here to the right. So now let's show a different way to show to calculate 5 to the 3rd power. Notice these two buttons right here, A to the 2nd and A to the B. A to the 2nd is saying any number that you want, you can put in and find what it would be equal to the 2nd power. A to the B is saying, all right, well, what if it's an exponent other than 2? Like what we're going to do now. So we're going to type in 5, and then we want it to the 3rd power. So I'm going to push this button, A to the B. Notice the cursor goes up a little bit. And now I'm going to type in my exponent, which is 3. So notice it looks like 5 to the 3rd power. And what's my answer? 125, just like it is if I typed it out in the expanded form. All right, well now it is your turn to try. So pause the video, you're going to fill in all of these blanks, then you're going to press play and the little quiz questions will pop up. And then when you're done, make sure you watch it all the way to the end and hit submit at the end of the video. Okay, so go ahead and press pause. So to recap, in today's lesson, you learned what an exponent is, how to write a number in exponential form, expanded form, and standard form, and also how to use the Desmos calculator to be able to evaluate a number in exponential form. So great job. Make sure you have your notes in your binder. Make sure you bring your binder to class, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.